How often have you found yourself asking for something, only to realize later that it wasn't what you truly needed? Life is full of moments like this. We ask for a better job, but when we get it, we feel even further from what truly satisfies us. We ask for love, but end up trapped in relationships that drain our energy. As humans, we often confuse desire with need, and this shows up in our prayers. James 4:3 clearly reminds us, "When you ask, you do not receive, because you ask with wrong motives that you may spend what you get on your pleasures." Imagine you are at a grand banquet, and in front of you is a table full of delicious dishes. However, your hunger is so great that you serve yourself recklessly, eating quickly and without thought. The result? Stomach pain and regret. This is how our requests are when we make them without wisdom. When we act impulsively, focusing only on what we want in the moment, we don't realize what is truly necessary for our well-being in the long term. Asking without wisdom is like trying to navigate a boat without a rudder, letting the currents take you wherever they want. It might seem like you're moving, but the direction is uncertain and often dangerous. God, as an experienced captain, is always ready to guide us, but He expects us to know where we want to go and for our motives to align with what is best for our journey. When we ask for things based only on immediate pleasures, we move away from that safe direction. Consider the story of Solomon. When God gave him the opportunity to ask for anything, He didn't ask for wealth, glory, or the defeat of enemies. He asked for wisdom, and with that came everything else. It's the power of asking with wisdom. It opens doors you didn't even know existed because it's not based on ego or fleeting desires, but something much greater, something that transcends the moment. Asking with wisdom is like planting a tree and expecting fruit to grow, but understanding that the roots need time to strengthen first. The waiting period is part of the process. When the fruits finally appear, they are far sweeter and more satisfying than those that could have been harvested prematurely. A powerful example of this is found in Luke 15, where the prodigal son asked for his inheritance too early, driven by the urge to satisfy his present desires. But without wisdom, he squandered everything in fleeting pleasures. And in the end, he realized that what he had longed for left him empty and purposeless. This teaches us that it's not about how much we ask for, but about how we ask and why we ask for it. A wise request never returns empty because it is anchored in truth and purpose, not momentary pleasure. Always remember, the error is not in asking. We all have needs, dreams, and desires. The error lies in asking without discernment, without considering the consequences. What are we planting with our requests? Are we ready to reap what we ask for? Wisdom teaches us to wait for the right moment, to ask for what truly matters, and, above all, to trust that God knows what is best, even when we can't see it. So it's not just about asking for the sake of asking, but asking with purpose, clarity, and a heart aligned with what will bring real growth. Every request made with wisdom brings us closer to the fullness we seek. As we delve deeper into understanding how to ask with wisdom, we realize that true wisdom goes beyond simply aligning our desires with God's will. It teaches us to trust His perspective, which is infinitely broader and deeper than ours. God sees the end from the beginning, and this means that when we ask, He is already preparing us for something we may not even be able to imagine yet. He sees the impact of our choices not only in our lives, but also in the lives of others, and His response is always in harmony with His divine plan. As we begin to view the world through this lens, our way of asking also changes. We are no longer seeking only personal gratification, but rather seeking a greater purpose. Asking with wisdom means asking for that which draws us closer to God and enables us to be more effective in fulfilling the mission He has entrusted to us. This helps us understand that the blessings we receive are not for accumulating or for making ourselves more comfortable, but to empower us to serve more fervently, love more compassionately, and live with greater purpose. Wisdom also teaches us not to fear the wait. Even in times of uncertainty or periods of silence, God is working behind the scenes. He is shaping our patience, strengthening our faith, and often teaching us to deal with discomfort before revealing the great blessing. Instead of viewing the wait as an obstacle, we begin to see it as an opportunity for growth, a chance to deepen our trust in God's perfect timing. Moreover, asking with wisdom teaches us to recognize that true transformation does not happen in times of ease but in challenges. The difficult situations we face while waiting for God's answer are often the times when we grow the most. They refine us, strengthen us, and prepare us for something greater. Divine wisdom gives us the ability to look at challenges with a new perspective, as opportunities to trust more fully in God and become stronger and more centered. Finally, when we ask with wisdom, we begin to live in a way that reflects God's character in our lives. Instead of asking only for what we want, we ask for what He wants for us. And as we align more and more with His will, we become more aware of His work in our lives and more grateful for the blessings He gives, whether small or large. The true fruit of asking with wisdom is a life transformed, more aligned with divine purposes and better prepared to live at the center of God's will. As we continue to grow in wisdom, we begin to realize that every request has the potential to shape our character. Asking with wisdom makes us more humble, more willing to listen, and more patient. This transformation doesn't only occur within us, but also affects how we relate to others. When we seek divine wisdom, our perspective shifts and we begin to see people through God's eyes with compassion and understanding. Asking with wisdom isn't just a personal practice, it's a way of living in community, seeking the good of those around us. Another important aspect is that when we ask with wisdom, our trust in God grows stronger, even when the results aren't what we expected. We may not understand why certain prayers aren't answered in the way we imagined, but wisdom teaches us to trust in God's faithfulness. He never fails in His promises, and often, what we consider a no is actually a blessing in disguise. Over time, we realize that God's no's are just as valuable as His yeses, as they protect us and lead us to something better. In the end, the wisest request we can make is to ask God to grant us more wisdom. When we surrender to His wisdom, we draw closer to His heart and become more aware of His plans for our lives. Asking with wisdom leads us to live more fully and abundantly, not in material terms, but spiritually, emotionally, and relationally. True abundance comes when our lives reflect the character of Christ. And this is only possible when we learn to ask with wisdom, trusting that God knows what is best and that He is always with us, guiding us every step of the way. When we begin to ask with wisdom, we begin to see results that are far beyond what we initially imagined. As we trust God's timing and seek His will in our requests, we start to experience the fruits of wisdom, peace, clarity, and fulfillment. These rewards are not based on what we can accumulate, but on the transformation of our inner lives. Wisdom helps us navigate life's challenges with a steady heart, knowing that our decisions are guided by a divine hand that sees the bigger picture. The greatest reward of asking with wisdom is the deepening of our relationship with God. Each request made with wisdom draws us closer to Him, creating a bond of trust and dependence. God is always faithful to answer our prayers, not always in the way we expect, but always in the way that is best for us. We come to understand that His answers are often part of a larger plan, one that we may not fully comprehend in the moment, but that unfolds over time, revealing the beauty of His perfect will. When we ask with wisdom, we also learn the importance of contentment. As we shift our focus from short-term desires to long-term growth, we discover that true satisfaction doesn't come from immediate gratification, but from the fulfillment that comes with living in alignment with God's purpose. This sense of contentment doesn't mean that we stop dreaming or desiring. Rather, it means that we trust God to lead us to what we need, knowing that His timing is always perfect. The wisdom we gain from asking with purpose and clarity becomes a valuable tool in every area of our lives. Whether in our relationships, careers, or personal growth, the ability to make wise decisions leads to more fruitful outcomes. It helps us avoid the pitfalls of impulsive choices and guides us toward choices that honor God and bring lasting peace. As we continue to seek God's wisdom, we become more adept at discerning His voice and following His lead in every situation. In the end, the rewards of asking with wisdom are immeasurable. They transform not just our circumstances, but our hearts. We experience a deeper connection to God, a greater sense of peace, and a clearer understanding of His will. The true reward lies in becoming more like Christ, living a life that reflects His love, grace, and wisdom in all things. Living in alignment with divine wisdom means choosing to seek God's will over our own impulses and desires. This journey isn't always easy, but it's a path that leads to profound fulfillment and purpose. It's a daily decision to trust that God knows what is best for us, even when we can't fully understand the reasons behind His answers. Wisdom helps us step back from our immediate wants and focus on what will bring true, lasting peace and joy. A life aligned with wisdom also involves patience. Wisdom teaches us to wait for God's timing, knowing that He is never early or late but always right on time. We often rush ahead of God, trying to force things to happen in our own timing. But true wisdom teaches us to rest in His plan and trust that what He has for us will come when we are ready for it. This trust in God's perfect timing not only strengthens our faith but also increases our peace, knowing that He is in control. Moreover, living according to wisdom requires a heart that is open to correction. It means being willing to learn from our mistakes, adjust our course, and grow in understanding. God, in His wisdom, guides us through both the successes and the failures, teaching us valuable lessons that shape our character and equip us for the future. Each step of the way, wisdom reminds us that growth often comes through challenge, and that every experience, whether good or bad, is part of His greater purpose. In this process of living wisely, we also experience greater freedom. When we make decisions based on wisdom, we free ourselves from the burden of regret, guilt, and confusion. We are no longer driven by fleeting desires but are grounded in the peace that comes from following God's will. This freedom allows us to live authentically, not controlled by fear or anxiety, but confident that God's path is the best path for us. Ultimately, living a life aligned with divine wisdom is about becoming more like Christ. It's about reflecting His love, His humility, and His understanding in every aspect of our lives. As we ask with wisdom and walk in His ways, we become vessels of His grace and truth, spreading His light to those around us. The more we embrace this wisdom, the more we experience the abundant life He has promised, a life full of purpose, peace, and divine fulfillment. As we continue to ask with wisdom, we come to understand that not all answers are immediate, and not all requests are granted in the way we expect. But wisdom teaches us that even in these moments of waiting or unanswered prayers, God's plan is unfolding perfectly. Trusting in God's perfect plan requires us to let go of our own timelines and surrender to His wisdom, knowing that He sees the bigger picture. Sometimes the hardest part of asking with wisdom is accepting that God's answer may be different from what we initially hoped for. His answers may not always match our desires, but they always align with His greater purpose for our lives. It is in these moments of uncertainty that our trust in Him is refined, and our relationship with Him grows stronger. We begin to realize that God's no is not a denial of His love, but a redirection to something far better than we could ever have imagined. Wisdom also teaches us the importance of staying steadfast in faith. When things don't go as planned, or when we face challenges, it can be easy to question God's plan. But wisdom assures us that even in difficulty, God is still at work. He is shaping us, preparing us, and teaching us to rely more on Him and less on our own understanding. With wisdom, we can navigate life's uncertainties with confidence, knowing that God's plan is always good, even when we don't see the outcome immediately. As we align our request with God's wisdom, we begin to experience a deep sense of peace, even in the midst of waiting. The process of asking and waiting for God's answer teaches us to trust in His timing, which is always perfect. We learn to be patient, to rest in His promises, and to be confident that He is working everything out for our good. This peace is not based on our circumstances, but on our trust in the God who knows what is best for us. In the end, trusting in God's perfect plan is about surrendering our desires and expectations to His will. It's about recognizing that His ways are higher than ours, and that He knows what we truly need. When we trust in God's wisdom and His timing, we open ourselves up to a life of peace, purpose, and fulfillment. The more we surrender to His plan, the more we experience the abundant life He has promised. A life that is far greater than anything we could ask or imagine. As we continue to ask with wisdom, we begin to understand that our requests are not just about the outcome, but about aligning ourselves with God's will. Every prayer, every request becomes an opportunity to draw closer to Him. The more we seek God's wisdom, the more we realize that true fulfillment is found in aligning our desires with His desires. When we ask with wisdom, we are not only seeking answers, but also seeking to understand God's heart and purpose for our lives. It's important to recognize that God's will is always good, even when it doesn't match our expectations. Our understanding is limited, but God's understanding is limitless. When we ask with wisdom, we learn to surrender our own plans to Him, trusting that His plans are far greater. We may not always understand why certain things happen, but wisdom allows us to trust that everything is working together for our good. This trust in God's goodness helps us stay grounded, even in times of uncertainty. Moreover, as we ask with wisdom, we begin to experience the peace that comes from knowing that we are walking in the will of God. This peace surpasses all understanding and guards our hearts and minds. It's not about the immediate gratification of our desires, but about the deep sense of assurance that comes from knowing we are following God's plan for our lives. This peace becomes a powerful witness to others, showing them the strength that comes from trusting in God's wisdom. As we grow in wisdom, we begin to see the world around us differently. We start to view challenges as opportunities for growth and learn to embrace God's will in all circumstances. The wisdom we receive helps us understand that life is not just about what we can gain, but about how we can serve others and honor God with our lives. The more we ask with wisdom, the more we reflect Christ's character in our actions and decisions, and this becomes a testimony to His love and grace. Ultimately, asking with wisdom leads us to a deeper understanding of God's will for our lives. It teaches us to trust, to wait, and to align our desires with His perfect plan. As we continue to ask with wisdom, we experience a life that is marked by peace, purpose, and fulfillment, a life that is fully surrendered to God's will. And in doing so, we discover that the greatest gift of all is not what we receive, but the intimate relationship with God that is built through asking with wisdom. As we continue to ask with wisdom, we recognize the importance of maintaining a consistent faith. Wisdom is not a one-time decision. It is a continuous process of learning, growing, and trusting. Our faith must remain steadfast, especially in times of uncertainty. When we ask for God's wisdom, we commit to living by it every day. This consistency in faith helps us stay grounded, even when circumstances seem difficult or when answers don't come right away. The power of consistent faith lies in its ability to transform our perspective. When we consistently seek God's wisdom, we start to see life through a lens of faith and trust in His perfect plan. This perspective allows us to handle challenges with patience and resilience, knowing that God is working in the background even when we can't see immediate results. Wisdom teaches us to persevere, to hold on to our faith, and to trust in God's timing even when the journey feels long. Moreover, consistent faith strengthens our relationship with God. The more we rely on Him for wisdom, the more we develop a deep sense of dependence on His guidance. This growing intimacy with God transforms our hearts and minds, making us more attuned to His voice and more obedient to His will. As our relationship with God deepens, so does our ability to discern His wisdom in every situation, leading to more wise decisions and greater peace in our lives. In times of trial, consistent faith becomes a source of strength. It helps us remember that God's love for us is constant, no matter the circumstances. We learn that even in the hardest times, He is still with us, guiding us and sustaining us. Our faith in His wisdom helps us endure the challenges we face, knowing that His plan is always good and that He is faithful to lead us through it. Ultimately, the power of consistent faith is found in its ability to change us from the inside out. As we continue to ask with wisdom, we become more like Christ, reflecting His love, grace, and wisdom in everything we do. Our faith becomes a testimony to the world around us, showing others the strength that comes from trusting in God's perfect plan. The more we lean on His wisdom, the more we experience the abundant life He has promised, filled with peace, joy, and purpose. When we begin to ask with wisdom, It's not just about receiving answers or making requests. It's about embracing a new way of living, one that reflects God's wisdom in all areas of our lives. Wisdom is not just an intellectual concept. It is a guiding principle that shapes our decisions, our actions, and our relationships. It teaches us to live with intention and purpose, always seeking to align our will with God's. Living out the wisdom of God means allowing it to influence the way we interact with others. It changes the way we respond to challenges, the way we treat people, and the way we handle difficult situations. Wisdom helps us make decisions that honor God and benefit others, rather than acting out of selfishness or impatience. It teaches us to choose kindness over anger, understanding over judgment, and peace over conflict. As we live out God's wisdom, we also experience transformation in our hearts. Wisdom helps us grow in humility, understanding that we don't have all the answers, but God does. It helps us become more compassionate, more patient, and more willing to serve others. Living out this wisdom requires us to humble ourselves and acknowledge that God's ways are higher than our own, and His plan is always better than our own ideas. Moreover, living out wisdom allows us to be a light to others. As we make wise decisions and reflect God's character, we draw people closer to Him. Our lives become a testimony of His love, grace, and power. People begin to notice that there is something different about us, and this opens the door to share the hope and peace we have found in God's wisdom. Our actions, rooted in divine wisdom, can have a lasting impact on those around us, inspiring them to seek the same wisdom in their own lives. Ultimately, living out the wisdom of God is a process that continues throughout our lives. It's not a one-time event or a single decision. It's a daily commitment to seek God's wisdom in everything we do. As we continue to ask with wisdom, we find that our lives become more aligned with His will, filled with purpose, peace, and joy. We learn that the more we live out His wisdom, the more we experience the abundant life He has promised. As we continue on this path of asking with wisdom, we begin to see the many blessings that come from aligning our requests with God's will. These blessings are not always immediate, and they may not always look the way we expect, but they are always good. When we ask with wisdom, we open ourselves to receive God's best for us, things far beyond what we could imagine or desire on our own. One of the greatest blessings of asking with wisdom is the peace that comes with knowing we are in alignment with God's plan. It's a peace that surpasses all understanding, one that guards our hearts and minds in times of uncertainty. This peace isn't dependent on circumstances, but on our trust in God's perfect timing and His good intentions for our lives. Another blessing is the growth we experience in our relationship with God. When we ask with wisdom, we learn to rely more on Him and less on our own understanding. This deepens our faith and strengthens our dependence on God, drawing us closer to Him with each prayer. The more we seek His wisdom, the more we learn to trust Him with every area of our lives, from our decisions to our desires. As we continue to ask with wisdom, we also experience transformation in our character. Wisdom teaches us humility, patience, and compassion, qualities that reflect the heart of Christ. We begin to act more like Jesus, choosing to love and serve others, rather than seeking our own gain. This transformation becomes a testimony to those around us, showing them the difference that God's wisdom can make in a life. Ultimately, the greatest blessing of all is the deeper intimacy with God that comes from asking with wisdom. When we make our requests in alignment with His will, we experience a relationship with Him that is rich, fulfilling, and full of purpose. We find ourselves walking in the fullness of the life He has designed for us, a life that is full of peace, joy, and fulfillment. The more we ask with wisdom, the more we understand that the greatest gift we can receive is the presence of God in our lives.